are so many problems that you must have seen, I'm pretty sure, but why are you so keen about poverty?
Well, it's important to define poverty. We define it based on the 8 Millennium Development Goals. So looking at not just hunger, it's education, it's the empowerment of women, it's also about maternal health, child health, which includes vaccines like polio. It also encompasses combating HIV, AIDS, malaria and other diseases, environmental sustainability. Poverty is an overarching term to describe many of these issues that are interrelated, because you can't, for example, tackle, say, something like maternal health without also addressing the health of the child. Do you know what I mean? So they're interrelated. Do you see what I'm saying? And so I care about extreme poverty because, one, it's something we can have a tangible impact in actually ending, and two, all these issues are interrelated. So for example, back in 2006, I ran the Make Poverty History concert in Australia. And this concert ultimately, and the movement that followed, the whole movement raised over $4.3 billion for the world's poorest. And this money goes to fund educational projects across Indonesia. You know, the Australian government built thousands of schools. You're talking about new funding for HIV, AIDS, malaria and tuberculosis in sub-Saharan Africa. All these issues are interrelated. So I care about extreme poverty because I care about Sonny Boy, that young boy from the Philippines, but and every other of the tens of thousands of people I've met in my journey. Yeah.
How big is the problem of poverty or extreme poverty in the world today?
So we define extreme poverty as those living on less than US $1.25 per day. And there are 1.4 billion people on this planet living in extreme poverty. The good news is that in 1981, the proportion of people living in our world who lived in extreme poverty was about 52% of the world's population. But now, in the last 25 years, thanks to the rise of the Southeast Asian tiger economies here in Thailand, you know, that has dropped now to only 25% of the world's population. So through the amazing economic development we've seen here in this region, we've seen that the proportion of people living in extreme poverty, particularly in Southeast Asia, has dropped dramatically. Sub-Saharan Africa is still lagging far behind. That's why when we talk about extreme poverty, we often talk about it like Africa plus. You know, it's Sub-Saharan Africa plus pockets of East Timor, plus pockets of Laos and Cambodia. This is what we're talking about. Yeah.
Nelson Mandela once said, poverty is not an accident. It is man-made and can be removed by man as well. Do you
Completely
agree with
agree. I'll tell you why I agree with Nelson Mandela on that, because there are many structural injustices that keep the poor poor. For example, unfair trading barriers that say the United States has high subsidies over agricultural trade.
Right.
If they removed that agricultural trade subsidy, then many African farmers in West Africa could actually compete on a level playing field. It's an example of a man-made situation that can be overcome by men and women through good policies. And so another example is, say, corruption that we see. You know, why does corruption flourish? It's not just because dictators are allowed to flourish, it's also because often the West is implicit in a process of international corruption through money laundering and offshore bank accounts. You know, this is a man-made structure. You know, we can also work to end it through actually tackling some of the structures that keep the poor poor. So I'm not just talking about foreign aid when I talk about ending poverty. You've got to change the rules to make trade fair, and you've also got to ensure that there's appropriate governance in place.
Was it difficult to do fundraising?
In general, I don't have any problem asking people to give so long as the cause is good. You know what I mean? I think that you have to be confident that the impact you're having is going to change the world in the right way. So for example, at the moment we're fundraising to eradicate polio in partnership with Rotary and others. Because I'm confident, I don't have any problem asking people to give, you know what I mean? Because it's a great cause and it's worth supporting. And so the same was the case with the Oak Tree Foundation. I had no problem asking people to contribute because we knew that it was going to fund educational projects across South Africa, the Philippines, elsewhere. You know, it was fantastic. Yeah.
You received the Young Australian of the Year award in 2004. What does the award mean to you?
Well, the Young Australian of the Year award gave me a national platform to take our message that we can end extreme poverty across the country. So we spoke in hundreds and hundreds of high schools, places of worship, businesses, clubs, foundations. You know, it was a huge privilege to have that award, and it really helped launch the whole Oak Tree Foundation, I would say. It took us from being a small organization with just me and a few of my mates to a national institution, which was an enormous privilege. So I'm incredibly grateful for the Australia Day Council for choosing me to be Young Australian of the Year. And I think that, you know, it's an incredible honour to be able to represent your country in that way.
So you're like a lobbyist group, pressure group.
I prefer the word advocacy.
Okay, fine.
But I mean, ultimately, the reason why I don't like lobbying is because you have the perception that there's some guy in Parliament just shaking hands and trying to convince people. We can only be successful if we can already demonstrate that we have the masses on our side. Do you know what I mean? And so all of our work is focused on how I'm fundamentally of the belief that every human being wants to make a difference in the world. You know, I think that we all are good and we all want to make a difference. So if I can have a conversation with you and you say, okay, I'll join the movement, and then you can have a conversation with 5 of your friends through Twitter or Facebook, all of a sudden we've got 20 people involved. And then we can turn that into hundreds of thousands. We can take those petitions to government and demonstrate that the people care about these issues.